Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's Stacker Chat. My name is Gina, and I'm an early team member with the Stacks project, joined by Muneeb Ali, Stacks founder. How are you, Muneeb? How's it going?
I'm great.
Excellent. Cool. Well, thank you so much for being here today. We're excited to dive right into some questions for the Stacker Chat. For anyone who is new here, the Stacks 2.0 blockchain launched earlier this year, bringing apps and smart contracts to Bitcoin. And these are just casual conversations with Muneeb to hear about his background, beliefs, and a little bit more about what's happening in the Stacks world. So one of the things that's come up, it's sort of like I think it's a theme in the crypto world, is just how quickly things move and how things are very sort of momentum based. It can feel a little bit ephemeral. But when we're thinking about Web 3.0 and what's going to win in the long term, there's sort of this concept of like type 1 decisions versus type 2 decisions. And you could consider type 1 decisions to be things that are irreversible. So once they're done, it's really done. Type 2 as being a little bit easier to pull back. And so I'm curious, like from your perspective, for newcomers that are coming to crypto and seeing so much out there, what do you think are the things to keep in mind for like the 10-year long-term vision and some of the factors that really go into these protocols?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. So in terms of comparison to Web 2 protocols or like TCP/IP or the 90s of the internet, I think a lot of people talk about how crypto could be like 90s, but it's hard to kind of like pinpoint like where exactly we are. One model that I like is just looking at the total number of users in crypto and comparing that to the total number of users on the internet. I think it's a very high level type of metric, but it's interesting. I think obviously there are different types of ways of measuring users, but I think ballpark, even if you say that there are 100 million users in all of crypto right now, that would put us at like late 90s, like 97, 98 in terms of the internet. And obviously, interestingly, that was a time when there was a lot of like, hype and interest in .com startups. And a lot of the ideas that came around at that time, some of them flourished, some of them actually kind of like didn't do that well at that time. Only later on, the same ideas, I think Webvan is a great example. It was like a delivery service, like Instacart. And now everything gets delivered and your food gets delivered, your groceries get delivered. But all of that is happening like literally decades after Webvan. Because it was just too early for its time, right? So similarly, I think we're already seeing this in crypto, like a lot of the things that people are getting excited about. And I do think the attention span kind of like moves around, right? Like sometimes NFTs are getting more attention, or then something like DAOs are getting more attention or whatever. But these ideas are not new, right? Like they've been around for 6-7 years or maybe more, and we don't even know if the time is right for these ideas even right. But I'm very confident of is there's some amount of time, I don't know if it's 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, but at some point these things are going to become real. By real, I mean that at a massive scale, like at the internet scale, just like home delivery services are now real, at least in the US, right? Maybe not so much in developing countries. It will happen. Like these ideas will eventually emerge, and I do think that then if you have like very long time horizons in mind, then you think about these type 1 type of decisions, right? Like and people who were designing internet protocols were like, people forget that there were actually competing internet protocols in the early days, and then some of them kind of frizzled out, and the other designs ended up winning. And in case of the internet, like I'll give you one example of a type 1 decision. Right. So a type 1 decision for Stacks is that we decided to build on Bitcoin. Right. That is a type 1 decision. Like now our consensus algorithm is literally connected to Bitcoin. Miners are mining on the Bitcoin side. The economics is linked to Bitcoin. Like when people through mining, like Bitcoin gets sent. So there's like a Bitcoin reward that's there. But even at the consensus level, we follow Bitcoin's finality. as well. So it has an impact on speed, it has impact, all sorts of things, but that's a type 1 decision. To be able to say that for some reason, Stacks is now no longer connected to Bitcoin and it's its own thing, that would be a very, very hard thing to do. So that's a very big type 1 decision that we've made, that we think, there are lots of experiments happening, but we think that Bitcoin maximizes for decentralization. Bitcoin maximizes for independent verification, has the largest community, the best chance of actually becoming a sovereign store of value, and we want to build around Bitcoin. So that's an example of a type 1 decision. And other people have made other decisions. I think we'll basically see how some of that pans out over time. And I think in general, people kind of like forget kind of like how early it really is. Like, we don't even know yet what the core protocol stack is going to look like. Is it going to be massive consolidation on a single kind of like ecosystem? Is it going to be multiple chains? Is it going to be like hundreds of them, or is it going to be like less than 10 or maybe a handful? We don't really know, right? And I think people are sometimes too early to call winners in the space as well, when we're actually like in a very, very early stage.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. Now, one of the things you actually tweeted about recently was the Lightning Network and how there's been a lot of development there, which has been super exciting to see. And Stacks and Lightning communities have actually done hackathons and collaborations in the past. So I'd love to hear, are there any sort of app ideas or use cases that you feel like would be good fit for both Stacks and Lightning to work together on potentially in terms of like independent folks that might do this? And yeah, any other collaborations that you'd love to see potentially between Stacks and other chains generally?
Yes, so I think Lightning is a great example of a Bitcoin project, which is like they're just building quietly with their heads down. They don't spend a lot of time on like marketing and hype or anything like that. And they've been building for a very long time. And again, they have these long time horizons in mind. That the core thesis is that, look, Bitcoin is going to be the sovereign store of value, the sound money of the world, and they want to bring that to billions of people, right? And they want to make these transactions really, really fast. And interestingly, you mentioned that things are the attention span in crypto could be small, right? So back in the day, I remember like back in like 2016 or even like early parts of 2017, when people started thinking about scalability early on. This is before CryptoKitties happened, right? And I've been a strong supporter of layer 2s, right? So Lightning is a layer 2 network, and back in the day, those approaches were heavily criticized, right? That layer 2s, oh, no, we're gonna have like sharding or something else, and layer 1s are gonna scale and this and that. And at that time, just from first principles, just from critical thinking, both us, Stacks, and Lightning, we were in the camp of like scalability makes more sense through layers on top versus like sharding like techniques. And we like, interestingly, like sometimes the Ethereum and Bitcoin communities, they kind of have different points of views and they argue with each other. And people have forgotten that the Ethereum people would argue how L2s are actually not a good thing, right? And now it's all about L2s, even in the Ethereum community. So they're actually coming around. They're actually changing their position. There have been multiple significant changes to even the design of Ethereum 2, where there's actually no smart contracts on Ethereum 2 anymore, right? Like it's just a data layer. And they have come around to the original way of thinking that people like Lightning and Stacks have been talking about years ago. And now they're celebrating that. And if anything, they're actually like, there's more hype and more marketing happening. And it's all about like, L2 summer or something like that, which is great. I think from a pure technical perspective, that's actually a better design. And that's great that they're finally coming around to the right designs. But hey, let's not forget, we were always there. And we were always kind of like doing that. And same with Lightning. I think Lightning has been declared dead by people. That hey, nobody uses it, yada yada. If you actually dig deeper, like it's growing like anything. Like there are so many independent startups that are working on it. The number of kind of like channel capacity of how many bitcoins you can actually use, that's actually going up. The excitement in the developer community, like it's any measure you pick, Lightning is a success story, and it's going to feel like that. Like, you know, imagine suddenly, you know, Square enables it or Twitter enables it. It's going to suddenly feel like it went from like it's everywhere now, right? But it's going to be again that classic 10+ year focusing on the long term, and then suddenly it's going to feel like an overnight success, right? And I think that those are the type of values like I deeply share with Saks as well. Like we have our principled view of how to build a decentralized ecosystem and a blockchain that can survive for the long term in kind of like in a state with Bitcoin where both are benefiting from each other, right? Instead of fighting with Bitcoin that, hey, no, Ethereum is better than Bitcoin or something, like, you know, smart contracts can actually live in the broader Bitcoin ecosystem and can have a very healthy, mutual, two-way relationship. And I think those types of economic alignment is actually critical for long-term stability before kind of like clear winners start to emerge in the smart contract space, right? So in terms of the interesting work we could do with Lightning, obviously, you know, there people over there are Bitcoiners like us, so we love hacking together on interesting things. But we actually looked at Lightning when we were designing POX as well, because in POX, fundamentally, you're trying to move a bunch of Bitcoin, and you don't want to do that by paying like lots of transaction fees on the Bitcoin network, or just basically consuming too much of the Bitcoin network as well, right? So people who are more familiar with POX, they would realize that there is a 4,000 slot limitation. And that's why, you know, there's a threshold of minimum number of stacks you need when you're locking them up. Obviously, there are pools and you can get behind a pool to get around this. But that limitation actually comes from Bitcoin bandwidth, because we don't want to consume too much of the Bitcoin bandwidth for stacks usage of the Bitcoin network. But if you were using Lightning, you potentially don't have that limitation. And we tried exploring some of the things. At that time, due to various technical reasons, it was better to do it on the Bitcoin base chain, and I actually think that was a right decision. But the Lightning ideas can still be explored, right? Like there are two ideas that I'm very, very intrigued by, very interested in, and would love to explore. I haven't had the time to really dig in yet, but I'll just share them anyway. One of them is Lightning channels that actually are not Bitcoin to Bitcoin, but they're actually Bitcoin to stacks. And what can happen with Lightning channels like that? And Stacks is in a unique position to do that, because Stacks has full visibility into Bitcoin. It follows Bitcoin state. It can actually tell if something happened on the Bitcoin side. So what can you do through Lightning channels like that? I think that's very interesting. The second one is more around you know, just like Satoshis. Like in Lightning, like Sats is the currency, right? So everyone's sending Satoshis around. Can we have like a synthetic Satoshi on the stack side, right? And then maybe somehow, just like people trade like, you know, Bitcoin with wrapped Bitcoin, have those types of trades. And again, Stacks is in a unique position to do that, because you could potentially do atomic swaps as well between STX and Bitcoin, or between other types of assets. So if you have like, you know, call it like XSAT or something, it's like a synthetic Satoshi, but it's programmable in the Stacks world. So you can start doing interesting things with it. And then obviously you could swap it with actual Satoshis, and then the type of applications people can build with that primitive could be super interesting, right? So that's one idea. Recently I was tinkering with it, and I'll spend some more time fleshing it out.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So I think the community would love to hear more, but there's a little bit of inspiration for folks that are out there. You mentioned about sort of like the synergies between networks, and that brings us to an interesting point here about sort of Stacks miners who have actually spent over 600 Bitcoin mining Stacks to date. And so that's over $20 million at today's prices. Now, a lot of those Bitcoin have been sent as rewards to Stacks holders. and a small part has been burned. And so I'm just curious to hear a little bit more about how do you see the relationship between sort of Bitcoin miners and the Stacks network really evolving over time?
Yeah, so I think this is first of all amazing to see, right? Like it's been obviously we launched in January, and it's been a few months really, but a lot of the game theory and the critical components of the consensus work have actually played out in a fully decentralized manner. Right, like this network was not launched by a company. It was actually launched by decentralized miners all around the world. We don't even know who they are, right? And they came around and they basically started mining. And interestingly, there's a lot of game theory work that's going on here, right? And the idea is that the miners are being incentivized real time to come in and mine a block and spend Bitcoin. Before we launched, I would often hear criticism of the work that why would anyone spend their Bitcoin to mine stacks? So that's kind of like in the rear view mirror, right? Like people clearly are spending their Bitcoin to mine this, because I always viewed this as a basically it's more of a trade, on-chain trade between Bitcoin and stacks, and the miners, they would make the trade if they think it's profitable. So it actually doesn't even matter what the market price is for Bitcoin and stacks are. Whatever the trading pair is, there's always some potential to make money by the rates that the trade is happening at the Bitcoin side. Right? And obviously there are further incentives as well. There's the gas fees, and as more and more transactions are happening on the network, there are incentives to have the gas fee. But that's basically the bandwidth of the trade. Like what's the volume, right? So as the volume increases, more miners might come in, and they might want to make the mining process more efficient. But interestingly, what's happening is that with all these miners participating, and it's a permissionless system. We don't require anyone's permission to participate, right? So first thing that checks out is it's a fully decentralized, fully permissionless system, right? Anyone can come in, mine. That's amazing. B, the game theory is working. People are doing that, right? So they are securing the chain. There are millions of dollars are changing hands, and which are securing the chain, which basically increases the security budget for certain types of attacks and whatnot, which is amazing. And then, interestingly, it also proves out a couple of interesting things on the Bitcoin side as well, right? One is these miners are actually highly motivated to pay tons of Bitcoin transaction fees. Like I wouldn't be surprised. Like I don't run a miner. Hiro doesn't run a miner, so we haven't done this ourselves. But I wouldn't be surprised if they have custom software to do replace by fee in the Bitcoin mempool very aggressively, because it matters to these miners a lot that their block gets it. Right? Which means these are parties that are willing to pay high fees on the Bitcoin, and they will continue to pay high fees, right? So Bitcoin is actually at some point going to go through this transition where the coin-based reward is going to go down, and the transaction fees are meant to become more meaningful. These miners, they will continue because they're economically incentivized to pay high fees. If the fees actually, like, you know, if you're making so much profit, you're willing to pay the fee, right? If you're securing such high amounts of data, so the density of the data that they're actually securing on the Bitcoin side is all the transactions that are happening on the stack side. They're just packing it up. So they're actually, that's good for Bitcoin because Bitcoin is a settlement there, right? And you're actually settling useful information and a high amount of information, and you're condensing it, packing it on the Bitcoin side, and paying the appropriate fee there. And finally, these miners are actually proving that you could attach more energy efficient extensions to Bitcoin. Because when these people are just spending Bitcoin, there's no carbon footprint really. Like, yes, there's some negligible value of the whatever, you know, fraction a Bitcoin miner had to do to process a Bitcoin transaction, but that's nothing. There are thousands of transactions in a Bitcoin block, but these hashes are representing thousands of transactions in the Stacks block, and there's no electricity consumption there. And which is super interesting. What that gives Bitcoin is a reusable mechanism to secure other types of data in an energy efficient way while using Bitcoin as a settlement. So this completely debunks that argument that as more transactions happen in the Bitcoin ecosystem, the energy usage is going to go up. It's not. We've already proved that out, right? In the last 6 months or so, that when more transactions happen on stacks, nothing changes on the Bitcoin side because it's the order of the number of miners. It's not the order of the number of transactions happening on the stack side. So I think those are some of the interesting observations for just seeing this out in the wild, functioning in a fully decentralized way.
Absolutely. And this is really sort of the first time this is playing out. And so I'm really excited to see for both stocks and for Bitcoin how this continues. Well, that's a wrap for today. Thank you so much for being here, Muneeb, and chatting. And thanks to everyone for watching. If you enjoyed your time with us, definitely subscribe to the Stacks YouTube channel here. We're going to continue doing these chats. Would love to hear from you. And if you'd like to hear more about Stacks, head over to stacks.co. We're also on Discord, and we'll continue tuning in. So thanks so much, and we'll see everyone soon.
Thanks a lot.